Thank you so much to everyone for joining our Arc Server monthly forum, and Happy New Year to folks. We're looking forward to a lot of exciting developments across Azure Arc, Arc-enabled server capabilities. And today we're going to have a real special focus on the new Windows Server capabilities as well. And so we're going to talk about Windows Server Pay-As-You-Go. Artem is going to be joining us and sharing more about that. We have Yash, who's going to be sharing more about Windows Server management capabilities as well as onboarding. And then we're going to be talking about a new scenario that our product group is looking into around Windows Resiliency. So for that, Annika will be sharing a demo of Windows Recovery Environment, and then we'll be doing some question and answer through polls to get your feedback and perspective on Windows Resiliency scenarios that best meet your needs. Before we get started, just one other quick piece of housekeeping. We had our January agent release. You'll find agent release notes now available. There was no December or November agent release, so there are a number of quality fixes there with that 1.48 release. Additionally, that includes software assurance benefits, including licensing check issues, as well as down-level support for Windows Server management capabilities through the Windows Server SA attestation. That's part of that most recent agent release. And so we encourage you to look to those release notes and stay up to date with the latest agent version there. But with that, we'll go ahead and kick things off. I'll hand over to Artem and talk about an exciting new capability that you're probably eager to learn about with Windows Server Pay-As-You-Go. Awesome, Artem. I'll let you take over. Feel free to take over screen share and for demo. Thanks.
Yes. Hello, folks. My name is Artem. Hope you can see me and hear me. I am from Windows Server team, and I'm excited to talk to you briefly about the new capability we built for Windows Server teaming with Azure Arc. So it's the classic better together thing where one feature or one product powers a feature or product in another family. So it's truly great teamwork because one doesn't work without another. So we're talking about Windows Server Pay-As-You-Go, which is a new licensing mechanism in Windows Server 2025. So today you only get it with Windows Server 2025. It's a new feature. So when you install Windows Server 2025, you can now choose a new licensing option. What is this? It's basically a simpler way to get a Windows Server license. Imagine if you don't have a license, maybe you have an older license that doesn't cover Windows Server 2025, or you just need to expand to another server, another VM, and you don't have a license. Now, instead of, let's say, going to some online store or maybe even offline store or talking to your licensing specialist how to purchase a new license, which can take months, sometimes weeks, sometimes days, still, you can just enable Windows Server licensing through Azure Arc or through Windows Setup and pay for it through Azure, through your Azure subscription. So assuming you have an Azure subscription already, if you don't, you will have to set up an Azure subscription, but I don't think any of you don't have an Azure subscription, given that all of you are Arc customers. So if you're already an Arc customer, you already have an Azure subscription. That makes it very easy to get a Windows Server up and running, paying for the license through Azure subscription on a monthly basis. And just to address a common question or a common concern, it's an alternative to traditional perpetual licensing, right? So we don't try to replace anything. We don't try to remove any existing licensing options. We don't try to sunset some perpetual licensing channel. No, everything you know and love about Windows licensing today or in previous versions remains. We just add one more option for scenarios where it makes sense, and where it doesn't make sense, you are free to not use it and even ignore its existence. And it's consistent experience for Windows Server. You can use it on-prem, you can use it on third-party hosters, you can use it in the cloud, anywhere you want. And it's not like a strictly new thing, right? So we already had subscription server products or pay-as-you-go subscription products One of the first one was what used to be called Azure Stack HCI, so now it's called Azure Local, but still the same product. It's a server-based or server operating system or server product, which you pay through a subscription. Actually, their subscription is the only way to pay for it. SQL Server 2022, a couple years ago, introduced subscription licensing as well. They call it pay-as-you-go, and it's very similar to what we do here, right? So it's enabled through Azure Arc. So Azure Arc is sort of our enablement mechanism here, and how we track the billing and how we make sure that the machine that was actually licensed is running and so on. And it's built through Azure Commerce. And like there's documentation about this if you want to learn more about how it works and how it's built. So in which scenarios it makes sense? We think it makes most sense in case of like sudden burst, like let's say you are a retailer who has some seasonal demand and you don't want to run as many machines as you need for the most of the year. But at some parts of the year, let's say maybe it's a tax season, maybe it's a holiday season, maybe it's like something else, which makes sense for your specific business model. You need more machines to run more workloads, right? It may be like additional web servers, maybe additional database servers, maybe additional some sort of e-commerce servers, what have you. So you can deploy a new VM or several new VMs for just a couple months or whatever it makes sense for you. You deploy them for a short period, and then you only pay for them for that period that you use them. And at the end of the season or at the end of this period, you disable pay-as-you-go on those machines and you shut them down and you never use them again. And note that I said you have to disable pay-as-you-go, because if you don't disable pay-as-you-go, it will still be built. So I will show it in a second on how it looks like on a portal. Another option is a simplified hoster licensing, right? So if you deal with the hoster and your current licensing model with the hoster is difficult and cumbersome for some reason, and you want to get away from getting billed for your Windows license through your hoster, maybe your hoster doesn't like it, they don't want to do extra work reporting all those licensing, maybe you don't like it, you can, as an alternative, again, we don't like try to replace anything, but as an alternative, you can say, okay, I will pay for my Windows license myself. I will enable pay-as-you-go in my Windows Server machine and pay for the license through the Azure subscription. That's now an option. And there are customers who just say, hey, I don't care about scenarios. I just like OpEx model. For my internal business reasons, I don't like CapEx model, capital expenses. I prefer operational expenses because it matches how I do business. It matches how I like report my spending and so on. So please give me a OpEx model for buying Windows Server license, and that's what I want to use. That's another reason why some customers may be using it, and another reason why we built it. Let me show quickly a couple experiences of how it works. So first of all, when you install Windows Server, and this is like regular Windows setup, right? So you just set up Windows, and you're all familiar with this experience probably, right? So it's just Windows installation. You boot from the ISO or boot from whatever media you have for deploying a new machine, and it can be physical machine, it can be virtual machine. So old good Windows setup that we're all familiar with. You click next, 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 install, I agree. And then you have this screen where previously you only had one option, which was to use a product key. And as you see, it's still the default because, again, we don't want to confuse anybody. We don't want to make an impression that we remove traditional options. No, those options are still here. But you can also say, no, I don't have a product key. I don't want to use a product key. I don't want to use existing license. Maybe I don't have a license. So you click pay-as-you-go, and this is all it takes. You click pay-as-you-go, you click next, and then there is the rest of setup is, again, business as usual. You select the edition, and then you answer a couple more questions, license, where you to install, and that's it. And then Windows gets installed, again, as usual. And when you log in for the first time, you will see a new visit experience where you sign into Azure and you confirm your Azure subscription and you confirm that you want to use pay-as-you-go, and you're done. You have Windows installed, it's licensed, it's activated, as you can see. And the nice thing, if you go to properties, you go to settings, to activation here, and it's activated, and it says Windows is activated with a digital license. So this is a hint that you're using pay-as-you-go. It's not a perpetual product key-based license. It's a digital pay-as-you-go time-bound license through Azure Arc. So yes, you connect to Azure Arc through this installation. And I think in the next session, we have a brief demo about how exactly you connect to Azure Arc. But this is how it works. You install, you connect to Azure Arc, you say you want to pay-as-you-go, and boom, Windows is activated. And now you can manage it on Azure Portal. So if you go to Azure Portal, you select this machine here. Again, you're probably all very familiar with this experience. Now we have a couple more things here in Azure Portal. So first of all, you can see that the license type is pay-as-you-go. So it's licensed and activated with pay-as-you-go, and pay-as-you-go is enabled. And second, you have this blade for pay-as-you-go here. It says activated, again, because you enabled pay-as-you-go previously. And here, again, if you have a reason to stop paying through pay-as-you-go, you just deselect this checkbox, you confirm, and you are no longer paying for this Windows license through pay-as-you-go. And let's say if you installed Windows, you didn't select pay-as-you-go, you didn't select pay-as-you-go during Arc installation, so you're in this state where the checkbox is not selected, but the checkbox is still available. If you want to start using pay-as-you-go on this machine and it's not currently licensed, you can select this checkbox, say, I want to enable pay-as-you-go, click confirm, and this is how you enable pay-as-you-go on existing machine if the machine is not licensed yet. So that's all the experience that we have. So again, you start through installation, then you enable it through Arc Installation Wizard once the Windows is installed. Then you can see it in Windows server properties in the settings that machine is activated through digital license. And then finally, you see it on Azure Portal. And you can manage it from there. You can enable, disable, and so on. So that's pay-as-you-go in a nutshell. I think we are right on time. And I'm happy to answer questions and concerns and comments in the chat window. Is it how it works, or not?
Yes, that sounds great. And thank you so much for sharing, Artem. This is really informative. One other thing that might be helpful is if there's any information on the pricing or billing. I know people will probably ask about that next. So if you want to drop those links in the chat, that would be great.
Yes. So short answer is pricing is the same as for Windows Server on Azure. So if you deploy Windows Server on Azure today, you can pay for the license through Azure, right? So it doesn't include, of course, the paying that you pay for the cores and storage and memory, but the price that you pay for the license. If you choose to pay for Windows license through Azure, it's the same price. But yes, I will drop the link in the chat window that we have it published, and we have a documentation about how to use this feature. Thank you, folks.
Awesome, thank you. And I know there's a number of questions in chat. With that, we'll invite up the next speaker, Yash, who will be really building off of this with Windows Server onboarding and management capabilities with the best practice assessment. So Yash, I'll let you take over screen share and go ahead and present. Thanks.
Thanks, Arnav. Happy to be joining this month. Let me get these slides up. All right, can everyone see these slides? Yep. Awesome. Cool. So Artem just talked a lot about the new pay-as-you-go licensing option. So, somewhat connected to that is just the really basic idea of I've got some Windows servers. How do I onboard them to Azure Arc? I won't cover every single deployment option, but I do want to make a call out that a big part of the story with Windows Server 2025 is that better together story with Azure Arc and making Arc feel like a native part of the operating system's fabric. And so to enable that experience, we've created some new inbox experiences, starting with the Azure Arc system tray icon that you can find in the bottom right corner of your taskbar. Once you click that big blue button, it leads you into this graphical user interface, this little wizard that'll help you install the latest version of the Arc agent, as well as configure that agent. You can select your tenant, subscription, resource group information, the region where you want to store your metadata, etc. And then there's also that new Windows license page in this wizard that helps you select pay-as-you-go if you would like it. And really the point of me showing this is it is now so ridiculously easy to onboard a server to Azure Arc. This process takes, less than 5 minutes, I would say. And at the very end, you can see the system tray icon update as well. But it is so simple. Just a couple clicks as long as you know your Azure subscription information and sort of where you want this server to show up in the portal. It should be really intuitive. Again, this is just one option, right? You always can go to the Azure portal to generate a script. You can even use desired state configuration, PowerShell, Windows Admin Center. If you're trying to do at scale, we recommend that you use a service principal, Terraform, Ansible playbooks, or group policy. And we've got step-by-step guides up on the MS Learn website as well for each of these deployment options. So just quick, refresher on all these options that you've got to deploy Azure Arc. Really just trying to highlight that, Windows Server is adding Azure Arc as, as much of a native capability as possible. Obviously, that doesn't mean that that Windows servers will be Arc-enabled right out of the box. You still do need to go through this process to fetch the latest Arc agent, install it, and configure it. If for some reason you don't like those inbox experiences, you can always go remove them. They're optional components on Windows Server 2022 and a feature on demand for Windows Server 2025. They're just there for ease of use. And yeah, that's sort of wraps up the onboarding section that I had. And really the exciting stuff that I want to talk about has to do with some of our announcements in the Ignite timeframe. We announced Windows Server Management enabled by Azure Arc. There are a whole slew of capabilities that you might have already tried out. Things like Windows Admin Center in Azure for Arc, as well as Azure Update Manager, Azure Policy, change tracking and inventory. A lot of these things should be familiar to you at this point. The awesome change, though, is a lot of these services that used to cost $5 or $6 per month per server are now completely free if you have software assurance or if you are using pay-as-you-go licensing as Artem displayed earlier, right? So massive change. We're really trying to encourage customers to, use these Azure management services and take advantage of all the goodness that, frankly, you get with cloud native infrastructure. And we know folks on premises are desperate to take advantage of. We're just trying to shepherd people sort of slowly in that direction. This is what modern management looks like, and we're really passionate about it. All of those sort of inbox legacy management tools, a lot of them have not seen active development in years. And as robust as they were at the time that they were released, it's slowly time to move things to this more hybrid setup where you can manage both your cloud infrastructure and your hybrid infrastructure all from the same portal, right? So I guess quickly to go through some of these services that are included. Again, Azure Policy, guest machine configuration, Azure Update Manager, Azure Change Tracking and Inventory. Again, those should not be super new to you, but Windows Admin Center in Azure for Arc will now be a part of sort of this pack of services. It was in preview before, and if you are already taking advantage of Windows Admin Center in Azure, even if you don't attest to having software assurance, I think we're giving you something like a 1-year grace period, so that should continue to work, but obviously we'd like you to attest to having SA so you can continue to use this in perpetuity. Remote support, a really neat capability in my opinion for production environments where if you're trying to get support from Microsoft engineers, you can give just-in-time access, and that way you don't need to be sort of alert and awake and on your machine guiding a support engineer. They can sort of take a look and you can provision certain access so that they can get what they need to help you out. Network HUD and ExcelNet, these are some advanced networking features that really, just supercharge your networking, make it really easy to configure, really easy to monitor and get alerting. So definitely encourage you to check that out as well. The best practices assessment is the one that I'm going to double click into, show you a neat little demo of that. And Azure Site Recovery Configuration. Just to clarify with this one, this does not mean that there's something, I think it's like $23 a month or whatever it is for the full Azure Site Recovery. That is not included as a part of this pack. It is simply a configuration tool to sort of simplify getting started with ASR. If you guys have any feedback about any of these experiences, it's only been a couple of months since this all has gone out. Please let us know. We know there have been some hiccups along the way because of some of the change freezes in Azure over the past couple months. But as Arnav mentioned, the vast majority of those bugs have been fixed with the latest version, the January Arc agent. So please give that a try. And of course, if things still aren't working, let us know. With that, I will dive into the best practices assessment. So again, once you've attested to having software assurance for a particular Windows server and it's Arc-enabled and showing up in the portal, you can click into this best practices assessment experience. The best practices assessment continuously scans your Windows server and evaluates the configurations based on Windows best practices. It assesses the server environment in the following areas: server baselines, server security, Hyper-V, failover cluster, and IIS. Again, these are some of the core capabilities that we know customers want feedback from, and they're looking to us to provide those best practices and make sure that everything is in line, especially when it comes to production environments. The customer sort of experience that you'll see is, again, just a little blade under that Windows management section that will say best practices assessment. It's still tagged as preview, just full disclosure for this particular capability. We expect that preview tag to come off shortly, but really this is quite a robust experience. And so there shouldn't be any issues that you run into. I'll jump into the demo now. So assessments, like I said, are run sort of automatically at the interval of your choosing. You can set an assessment frequency here. We set it to weekly every Wednesday. What I love about this is you're not just getting recommendations, you're getting weighted recommendations. So we're trying to help you as admins prioritize, what do I need to look at first? What really matters in the grand scheme of things? How much effort is it going to take to remediate this particular issue? And then what are the steps that I need to take, right, to solve this issue? What it takes to get started with this best practices assessment is to create a log analytics workspace. And so again, just full disclosure with, the set of capabilities that we just looked at on that previous slide, any sort of like compute cost or additional workspace cost in Azure will not be covered as a part of your software assurance. It's really these tools and experiences that you're getting that are covered. So in this case, it's a very tiny log analytics workspace that you would have to stand up. So there might be a very small incremental cost there every month. to just keep that workspace going. And yeah, as you can see there, you can play around once you have that workspace, order things by the weight, do any further analysis, pare these down, share these out, etc. So super excited about this best practices assessment tool. Let us know if these recommendations are helpful. We think that, at the scale that you all are operating at, this is the type of, sort of domain knowledge that when handed to an admin, they can really sort of spring into action and be great at managing Windows servers. Again, that's just one of the capabilities that we wanted to double click into today. But please, please, please get started. Keep attesting to software assurance. Sign up with pay-as-you-go. Take advantage of all of these new free capabilities. That's all I had. With that, I'll hand it off to Arnav and Annika to talk about the new resiliency scenario.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Yash. This is great to see with the best practice assessment capability. And we're going to be continuing to have more and more of these sort of deep dives into the different Windows Server management capabilities, the whole new suite of offer across site recovery configuration, etc., with each of these upcoming sessions. So we're looking forward to that. That said, we're going to pivot now and talk a little bit about Windows resiliency. And this is really kind of product exploration and new capability work that we're level setting with you on. And so we'd love to get your feedback and perspective and demo really what's upcoming from the Arc server side of the house. So with Windows resiliency, you want to step back and think about Windows recovery environment. So you're likely familiar already with WinRE, Windows Recovery Environment, which helps repair unbootable OS. It's critical for Windows resiliency. For any of the admins who've encountered a blue screen of death, maybe that was third-party driver code that wasn't working, memory issues, etc. Windows Recovery Environment, WinRE, can be really critical for that troubleshooting and for getting back to a healthy state and ensuring the operational resiliency for your Windows client, Windows Server environments as well. And so with that, we want to think about how Arc can support WinRE configuration, health, alerting, etc., and really empower admins to recover from potential WinRE environment scenarios. And so with that sort of level set, we wanted to actually demo a really new capability that we're working on with WinRE configuration and reporting of health through Azure Policy. So for that, I want to invite Annika, and I'll let you take it away and demo this new capability that's really in our early stage.
Now, I hope everyone can hear me. I'm trying to share my screen right now. In the essence of time, I have recorded the end-to-end demo so that I can talk you through the steps while the demo runs. So let's get started. Do let me know if something is not working or you can't hear me on your end. So for this demo, I'll be demoing two machine configuration policies where one is used to audit and the other one is used to configure the Windows recovery environment. So first of all, we will go to the Azure portal under the policy and click on definitions, and we will go ahead and filter it out with the WinRE so that you can quickly see the two policies. Here you can see under the guest configuration category, there are two policies. One is configure and the other one is audit. The first one that I'll demo is the audit Windows machines that don't have Windows recovery environment enabled. And the second one is configure Windows recovery environment on Windows machine. Before that, I also want to show you that I do have an Arc machine that I am going to test the policies on. So this will be that machine. So let's go ahead and assign the first policy, which is the audit. So we will go ahead and click on assign policy, and we will filter the scope to the resource group where my machine is under. And we will make sure that the parameter is set to true here because this is an Arc connected machine. And we can go ahead and click on review and create. Once it has successfully created the assignment, we can go to the Arc server again. And this time we will check under the machine configuration blade the policy status, compliance status. Here we can see that the compliance status for our audit policy is non-compliant. So let's check the compliance reason why that is the case. Here we can see that it's complaining about Windows recovery environment not set to enable, which this policy does expect it to be enabled. So this is the scenario that our configure policy covers. But before that, let's verify directly on the machine if that is really the case. Yep, it is set to disabled, so that matches with the compliance status reason. So we will go back to the policy portal, and this time we will assign the configure Windows recovery environment policy. And it is the same step for assigning, so I will not bore you with the details while we go through the steps. This time, once the assignment has been successfully assigned, we expect the Windows recovery environment to be enabled. So let's go ahead to the machine configuration blade again and check the compliance status this time. Here we can see the second policy from the top is reporting compliant of type apply and autocorrect. So let's go ahead and check what is the compliance reason for this one. It is saying it should be enabled right now because the policy has successfully completed. But let's verify it directly on the machine. Yep, this time it's showing that it has successfully enabled. But one last thing that I do want to show is previously it was disabled, now it's enabled. So our audit policy should also report compliant, right? So let's go ahead and give it a few minutes for a machine under the machine configuration blade to see if the audit policy also reports success, that is compliant. Yep, and here we can see it does report compliant. So that concludes my demo on this one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Annika, for sharing the demo and giving everyone kind of a flavor for what's upcoming in terms of some of the Windows recovery environment, Arc potential capabilities, and scenarios that we're exploring. So with that said, we wanted to step back a little bit and talk through some of the different scenarios we're exploring as a product group. And then we'll be doing some live polls and gathering feedback on your perspective on some of this. So as you've seen with WinRE, we're thinking about the end-to-end. From one, the configuration and reporting on the health of WinRE on your Windows Server instances running on-prem or other clouds connected to Arc, through to the alerting and reporting on when the servers are potentially entering into this WinRE mode, indicating that they've entered a stop error that's caused this blue screen of death, causing them to enter into that, through to how can Azure Arc be used for remote fixes and patches out of the box through desired state configuration, through the agent's existing capabilities, all the way through custom remediation and remote troubleshooting. And so we're thinking about this end-to-end from one, the configuration check, which you just saw through Annika with the Azure policy, where we're detecting whether or not WinRE is healthy and properly configured on your Azure Arc-enabled servers. Two, this notion of WinRE mode actually getting activated. So are our servers entering into WinRE? Can we build alerting to notify our system administrator server admins that you have this potential outage and that risk? Through to three, the sort of notion of remote fixes and patches, where if there are known fixes, we can use a COM plugin through Azure Arc, where the IT team could deploy known fixes to the affected servers remotely at scale without actually needing that physical access to those servers. And then finally, for this notion for remote troubleshooting channel, where if the issue requires further investigation, you can open a remote channel for troubleshooting through WinRE using Azure Arc. And so this is sort of the end-to-end the product group is envisioning and thinking about and really looking forward to customer feedback on. We have a Windows Resiliency focused customer study. We've sent out signups for that if you're interested with our newsletter. But with that, we wanted to take this opportunity with the forum to actually ask you all a bunch of questions through some polls and then hear from you directly as well. So I'm going to be launching polls. Please fill it out. If you are internal Microsoft, please refrain from using these polls unless you're customer facing. So with that, I'm going to start off with the first question, softball, which is how familiar are you today with WinRE? And so we'll give it a minute or so for folks to submit their responses. So we'll give it just a few more seconds, then we'll close up this poll. So it looks like there is moderate familiarity with WinRE, somewhere between around 3 is where it looks like the average is for WinRE awareness. With that, I'm going to jump into the next set of questions here. And with these set of questions, we're going to be asking a little bit more about the proposed workflow that we just showcased for you all. And so with that, we want to learn a little bit more about how useful is that proposed workflow that we just showed you in terms of WinRE configuration and health through WinRE alerting through to the WinRE sort of remote remediation and fixes when there are challenges. And then additionally, we wanted to ask about how likely you are to actually use this proposed workflow for your Windows Resiliency environments. And if you're not directly a WinRE practitioner, sort of placing yourself in the shoes of those that might be responsible for resiliency within your organization. And then finally, the thinking around, would you be actually willing to allocate budget for this, or is this something you see as built in with default, a free benefit with Azure Arc for your servers? So we're looking for feedback across the board there, across the usefulness of the proposed flow through to whether or not this is something you'd actually use, through to whether or not this is something you'd want to allocate budget for. And again, this is very early innings for us, so we'd love your feedback early on this. So we'll give it a few more minutes, a minute or so, as folks continue filling it out. So we're seeing an average of a little over 3 for how useful the proposed workflow is, around a 4 actually. And then we're seeing around a 3, slightly less in terms of how likely you are to use this. And then finally, we're seeing around 2 for how willing you are to allocate budget for this capability. So, all right. So with that, we'll move on to the next poll. And this next poll is going to be focused on some of the different subcomponents of the scenario we showed. And so what we want to know here is which subcomponents of that proposed workflow are most to least useful. So again, the subcomponents are, we had the WinRE health and configuration. So is WinRE properly configured on your machine? Is it healthy? 2, we had the WinRE alerting, like is your server entering into WinRE mode? Do you have a stop error? Is there a potential operational risk there? And alerting on that, as well as reporting in Azure Portal. Then there's the notion of WinRE remote patches and fixes are able to help you out there. And then finally, for those custom fixes, the WinRE remote troubleshooting channel as well. So you'd want to put your most impactful on top and least impactful on the bottom. So we'll give you a minute to think through that. And we know that this is potentially new if you're new to WinRE as well. So we'll just give it a minute or two. Awesome. And just to give folks a little bit of the results so far, what we're seeing is the WinRE mode alerting, whether we're entering into WinRE, that's the top scenario, followed pretty heavily by the WinRE health and configuration, so the policy to tell whether or not WinRE is healthy, and then the remote fixes and patches and troubleshooting are following that as sort of lower priority. So this is very helpful feedback for our product group. Thank you for thinking through this and thinking through the scenarios from your lens. All right. With that, I know we have a number of responses already. We'll move to the last and final question, which is this. We want to think about WinRE from the context of a broader Windows resiliency story. There's additional capabilities like BCDR that we're thinking about bringing in with Azure Arc. You saw a little bit of that with site recovery, and there's new capabilities like Windows Server Hot Patch. And all of this is tied together about operational resiliency for your mission critical Windows workloads. So we'd love to get your feedback as well for what's the demand in terms of bringing in backup for Azure Arc and BCDR capabilities, as well as how important is the current Windows Server Hot Patch capability for you as well, if you've had a chance to evaluate that. So we'd love your feedback there as well. Great. So we're seeing pretty robust feedback in terms of demand across both of those capabilities, nearing 4. So some of the highest responses that we saw today. Right. With that, that is actually a wrap for the polls we had and the feedback we wanted to share in terms of kind of our quantitative polling. I'm going to pause though, if folks have any questions, if anyone who uses WinRE today or has any thoughts on where you'd want to see WinRE feedback, we'd love to hear some perspective. So you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we'd love to hear any perspectives on folks on WinRE with Azure Arc and opportunity areas you see there for our product group. All right, it looks like folks don't want to unmute and share, but you can always feel free to email the Azure Arc product team, and please sign up for our research study. We have Gail here who's driving our great research study on Windows recovery environment and Windows resiliency more holistically. We have the sign up with our server forum newsletter, and so we look forward to your feedback there. With that, that's actually a wrap for today's session. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to stay on. But if not, we'll end our session for today. Thank you again for joining, and we're looking forward to subsequent sessions through 2025 and a lot of exciting developments. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Arnav.